The Dreams of Ghosts and Indians, a novel by Preston Jacobs, available in paperback and ebook. And we are back for part 5 of our reading and analysis of the Hedge Knight. The moon was well up by the time he turned his steps back toward his elm. Behind him, Ashford Meadow was ablaze with torchlight. The sounds of song and laughter drifted across the grass, but his own mood was somber. He could think of only one way to raise the coin for his armor, and if he should be defeated... "One victory is all I need," he muttered aloud. "That's not so much to hope for." And so we return to Dunk leaving Ashford Meadow and heading back to his camp. Dunk needs money to pay for his armor, and knows there's only one way to get it. It's not revealed here, but later we find out that Dunk is going to sell the horse Sweetfoot. He worries a moment about what will happen if he's defeated, but pushes the thought aside, hoping for one victory. And this really highlights how reckless and desperate Dunk is being here. So in the tourney, the loser forfeits his horse and armor to the opponent. Yes, if Dunk wins his first tilt, he gets his opponent's armor and horse and is fine. He can go on and lose and still have that first horse and armor set. But if he loses his first tilt, he loses everything. This is exactly like going into a casino and betting everything on black. Sure, if you win and set those winnings aside, you can continue betting. But if you hit red, you're done. Now, as we know, Ser Arlan's net worth was some armor and 3 horses. Sweetfoot, Chestnut, and Thunder. Dunk is trading the old armor and the value of Sweetfoot for new armor. If he loses his first tilt, he loses the new armor and Thunder. That's everything, save Chestnut, an absolutely worthless horse that's on death's door. In fact, Chestnut dies shortly after this story is over. Dunk is betting everything he has on this tourney, on a single tilt. And Dunk has never ridden in a tourney before. Even so, the old man would have never hoped for it. Ser Arlan had not ridden a tilt since the day he had been unhorsed by the Prince of Dragonstone in a tourney at Storm's End many years before. It is not every man who can boast he broke 7 lances against the finest knight in the 7 kingdoms, he would say. I could never hope to do better, so why should I try? Dunk had suspected that Ser Arlan's age had more to do with it than the Prince of Dragonstone did, but he never dared say as much. The old man had his pride, even at the last. I'm quick and strong. He always said so. What was true for him need not be true for me, he told himself stubbornly. And so here we get some more background on Ser Arlan. Arlan had not actually ridden in a tourney since the tourney at Storm's End, and this is significant as that tourney, we later find out, was 9 years ago. As Dunk is 16 or 17 years old, that means Dunk last attended a tourney when he was 7 or 8, which is a couple years after he was taken in by Arlan at 5 or 6 years old. And this is very important. Dunk was at Storm's End. This is very, very subtle. Dunk is 8 at Storm's End, just like Egg is 8 at Ashford. And if Dunk was at Ashford, it means that Ser Arlan was being completely honest when he said that he broke 7 lances against the Prince of Dragonstone. It's not some tall tale. Dunk was there. It was 7 lances against the Prince of Dragonstone. And I bring this up as later in the story, this knowledge is tested and Dunk gets it right, proving that he was in fact Arlan's squire. And then Dunk is forced to humbly claim, wrongly, that it was 4 lances when Baelor Targaryen says it was 4. It was 7, not 4, but Dunk is showing that he knows his place. He was moving through a patch of weed, chewing over his chances in his head, when he saw the flicker of firelight through the bushes. What is this? Dunk did not stop to think. Suddenly his sword was in his hand and he was crashing through the grass. He burst out roaring and cursing, only to jerk to a sudden halt at the sight of the boy beside the campfire. You! He lowered the sword. What are you doing here? Cooking a fish, said the bald boy. Do you want some? I meant, how did you get here? Did you steal a horse? I rode in the back of a cart, with a man who was bringing some lambs to the castle for my lord of Ashford's table. Well, you'd best see if he's gone yet. Or find another cart. I won't have you here. You can't make me go, the boy said, impertinent. I'd had enough of that inn. I'll have no more insolence from you. Dunk warned. "I should throw you over my horse right now and take you home." "You'd need to ride all the way to King's Landing," said the boy. "You'd miss the tourney." King's Landing? For a moment, Dunk wondered if he was being mocked, but the boy had no way of knowing he was born in King's Landing as well. Another wretch from Flea Bottom like as not. And who can blame him for wanting out of that place? And so next Dunk hears something and comes crashing through the grass to not find a thief, but Egg. Let's keep in mind, Dunk left his horses and other possessions back at camp unattended. He could have easily lost everything, even before the tourney. And this does really highlight Dunk's nature. He's reckless, and he doesn't think about his actions before he does them. He leaves his possessions behind unattended, he's entering a tourney with no tourney experience with all of his wealth, and his sword is in hand and he's attacking without even thinking. There could have been 10 men in the camp who would have killed him immediately, but no, he just jumps in. And this aspect of Dunk comes back later, before rescuing Tansel Too Tall. So luckily it's only Egg at the camp and not brigands, and Egg is cooking a fish. Now, in this conversation, we get a lot more hints that Egg is not who Dunk thinks he is. Now remember, Dunk thought Egg a stable boy whose mother ran the inn. And Dunk could have figured out that he wasn't the stable boy, as Egg claimed his mother was dead and not the innkeep, but Dunk isn't putting everything together. Here Egg reveals once again that he's not connected to the inn, and instead lives in King's Landing. And the mention of King's Landing makes Dunk think of his life in King's Landing. That of being an orphan in Flea Bottom, the life that Ser Arlan rescued him from. And he assumes Egg is like him. Dunk is projecting himself in Arlan's role, that of a hedge knight, and so he's projecting Egg in his old role, an orphan in need of a father figure. Yes, Dunk is completely wrong about Egg's backstory, but it does show that Dunk is a pretty sympathetic guy. He felt foolish standing there with sword in hand over an 8-year-old orphan. He sheathed it, glowering so the boy would see he would suffer no nonsense. I ought to give him a good beating at least, he thought. But the child looked so pitiful. He could not bring himself to hit him. He glanced around the camp. The fire was burning merrily within a neat circle of rocks. The horses had been brushed, and clothes were hanging from the elm, drying above the flames. "What are those doing there?" "I washed them," the boy said. "And I groomed the horses, made the fire, and caught this fish. I would have raised your pavilion, but I couldn't find one." "There's my pavilion." Dunk swept a hand above his head at the branches of the tall elm that loomed above them. "That's a tree," the boy said, unimpressed. "It's all the pavilion a true knight needs. I would sooner sleep under the stars than in some smoky tent." "What if it rains?" "The tree will shelter me." Trees leak. And so next we get a quick rundown of all the tasks Egg performs for Dunk, showing Egg's eagerness in wanting to squire for Dunk and go to Ashford. And we get a funny little exchange where Egg asks where Dunk's pavilion is. Dunk claims the tree is his pavilion, and Egg immediately tears down the logic of a tree being a pavilion. And this isn't just a funny exchange. Our author is making a statement about romanticizing things, truth, and perhaps the need to set truth aside every once in a while and continue to romanticize things. We had an entire section where Dunk tries to romanticize his poverty. He tells himself that this tree is a great pavilion, greener than the banners of Tyrell and Estermont. It's an idea so powerful to him that it eventually becomes his sigil, the symbol of himself. But it is a delusion, and Egg destroys that delusion immediately. A tree is not a good tent, and there is nothing romantic about being poor. And yet, we will see Dunk's stubbornness on this issue. Dunk laughed. "So they do. Well, if truth be told, I lack the coin for a pavilion, and you'd best turn that fish, or it'll be burned on the bottom and raw on the top. You'd never make a kitchen boy." "I would if I wanted," the boy said, but he turned the fish. "What happened to your hair?" Dunk asked of him. "The maesters shaved it off." Suddenly self-conscious, the boy pulled up the hood of his dark brown cloak, covering his head. Dunk had heard that they did that sometimes, to treat lice or rootworms or certain sicknesses. "Are you ill?" "No," said the boy. "What's your name?" "Dunk," he said. The wretched boy laughed aloud, as if it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Dunk?" he said. Ser Dunk? That's no name for a knight. Is it short for Duncan? Was it? The old man had called him just Dunk for as long as he could recall, and he didn't remember much of his life before. Duncan, yes, he said. Ser Duncan of... Dunk had no other name, nor any house. Ser Arlan had found him living wild in the stews and alleys of Flea Bottom. He had never known his father or mother. What was he to say? Ser Duncan of Flea Bottom did not sound very knightly. He could take Pennytree, but what if they asked him where it was? Dunk had never been to Pennytree, nor had the old man talked much about it. He frowned for a moment, and then blurted out, Ser Duncan the Tall. He was tall, no one could dispute that, and it sounded puissant. And so here Dunk reveals the truth, that he doesn't have the money for a pavilion. And then he goes on and asks Egg about his hair. Egg acts insecure about it, but in truth this is not an issue of vanity, but one of him fearing he's going to be caught. He says that the maesters shaved it, so I guess maesters also do haircuts. Now, as I mentioned before, when Dunk first spots Egg, he notes that he's skinny, pale, and has a shaved head. 3 things that are associated with sickness. Of course, this is a misdirect. Egg is pale because he's a Targaryen and has a shaved head to hide his silver hair. And here Dunk specifically asks about Egg being potentially sick, bringing up lice and rootworm, which can be treated by shaving the head. Now, rootworm is not a medical condition in our world, at least not under that name. What Dunk is likely talking about is actually ringworm, which is a fungal infection that back in the Middle Ages people used to think was caused by worms. They knew about hookworms and tapeworms and just assumed that a lot of conditions were worms too, rather than fungus. And then Egg asks Dunk what his real name is, and we find out something rather shocking. Dunk doesn't know his real name. Dunk was abandoned at a young age and may have had some sort of nickname in Flea Bottom, but that's all forgotten or perhaps repressed, as much of his life in Flea Bottom is. Ser Arlan just started calling him Dunk. Now, I will say that this is kind of retconned later. In the Mystery Night, Dunk suddenly can remember his life in Flea Bottom and the names of his friends, Ferret, Rafe, and Pudding. So the idea that he forgot his name or his nickname is not likely. But anyway, it seems that the name Dunk was bestowed on Dunk by Ser Arlan for an unknown reason. Or perhaps because it rhymed with lunk. Or maybe Dunk has something to do with the bathhouses? It's hard to say, and this is where things get a little more shocking. On the subject of bathhouses, we hear about the stews and alleys of Flea Bottom, which is incredibly revealing with regards to the backstory of Dunk. You see, a stew is a slang term for a public bath in medieval England, and George uses this term a few times in Ice and Fire, quite darkly. So, historically, the bathhouses of medieval England were fronts for prostitution. And when George mentions stews, he talks about them either as places where disease is being spread, or a place where one can grab a boy soldier when one is desperate for bodies. We hear about half-trained boys from the stews of Lannisport, and green boys from the stews of Lannisport. And here we have Dunk, a boy from the stews of Flea Bottom. It's always boys. So yeah, slipped in right here, we find out why Flea Bottom was such a horrible place for Dunk. He was a child prostitute at the age of 5 or 6, before Ser Arlan rescued him. So anyway, Egg then thinks that Dunk doesn't sound like a knight's name. It seems Egg knows Dunk's secret and is trying to help him, and he asks if Dunk is short for Duncan. Dunk latches on to Duncan, and as he has no house or surname, he decides to call himself Ser Duncan the Tall. He thinks it sounds puissant, which means powerful and influential. And yes, as Ser Duncan the Tall, he will be. Now, on a side note, around the time of the writing of the Hedge Knight, George invented another character named Ser Talad for A Clash of Kings, who is a Hedge Knight, but he's not called Ser Talad the Tall until A Feast for Crows. Though the little sneak did not seem to think so. I've never heard of Ser Duncan the Tall. Do you know every knight in the Seven Kingdoms then? The boy looked at him boldly. The good ones? I'm as good as any. After the tourney, they'll all know that. Do you have a name, thief? The boy hesitated. Egg, he said. Dunk did not laugh. His head does look like an egg. Small boys can be cruel, and grown men as well. Egg, he said. I should beat you bloody and send you on your way, but the truth is, I have no pavilion, and I have no squire either. If you swear to do as you're told, I'll let you serve me for the tourney. After that, well, we'll see. If I decide you're worth your keep, you'll have clothes on your back and food in your belly. The clothes might be rough spun, and the food salt beef and salt fish, and maybe some venison from time to time, where there are no foresters about. But you won't go hungry, and I promise not to beat you, except when you deserve it. Egg smiled. Yes, my lord. Sir, Dunk corrected. I'm only a hedge knight. He wondered if the old man was looking down on him. I will teach him the art of battle, the same as you taught me, sir. He seemed like a likely lad. Might be one day he'll make a knight. And so next Egg says he's never heard of a Duncan the Tall, and that he knows all of the good knights in the Seven Kingdoms, which is another clue on who Egg really is. Egg is a prince, and is surrounded by knights normally, and has been to many tourneys. He would absolutely know who the best knights in the realm are, most of whom would be in his company and at court. And then Egg reveals his name, Egg, which Dunk doesn't realize is short for Aegon, and completely thinks it's because his bald head looks like an egg. Dunk even thinks that this name was given to him by cruel children, before thinking about cruel men as well. This is another dark hint of the abuse Dunk suffered in Flea Bottom at the stews. Now, not that pronunciation matters at all, it doesn't, but the transition from Aegon to Egg has confused some fans on how to pronounce Aegon. In the show Game of Thrones, for example, the characters started saying Aegon, which is kind of backwards. You see, Aegon starts with the letters AE, which in Old English is its own letter, the letter ash, which usually sounds like ah with a diphthong in it, like in cat. So I suppose it would be Aegon. But I've never heard anyone pronounce it that way, and it kind of sounds pretentious. I've only heard Aegon and Aegon. The thing is, George actually did do his research here, but it's not that Aegon is pronounced like egg, it's that in Old English, egg also had the ash. So it was more like an ag. The pronunciation issue is really with the word egg. It's the thing that's shifted over time. But again, I'd like to stress, pronunciation does not matter. So Dunk then goes into a little speech about what is expected of Egg if he were to squire for him, and Dunk tells Egg what he would provide him in return. One of those things is venison when a forester isn't around, implying that Ser Arlan and Dunk used to poach various lords' game. This highlights the class disparity between the rich and the poor, something that was a bit more thematically present in A Game of Thrones. Let's remember that Will from the prologue is on the wall for poaching, and Ser Jorah tried to enslave some poachers. And it is very clear that this speech is either something similar to what Arlan said to him once, or is a basic summary of the arrangement that he and Ser Arlan had. We get the same line that we heard earlier about there being no beatings unless deserved, and in the end, Dunk very clearly makes the connection that he will be teaching Egg in the same manner that Ser Arlan taught him. Dunk even begins talking to Ser Arlan again here. He thinks Egg is a likely lad, which means he's a promising lad, and that one day he'll make a knight. Dunk is taking on the role of Ser Arlan and projecting a lot of his young self onto Egg. And that last bit about Egg making a knight is quite interesting. Obviously it's funny as Egg is a prince. Of course he'll make a knight. But again, Dunk is projecting. He's talking to his younger self. And as we talked about before, Ser Arlan never actually knighted Dunk. Ser Arlan trained Dunk and was a father to him, but we aren't actually sure if Ser Arlan thought Dunk would make a knight. It's possible he did, but we just don't know. And so Dunk is being a tad delusional at the end there, tacking on that last part. By taking on the role of Ser Arlan, Dunk in many ways is rewriting history for his own psychological well-being. He wants to believe that Ser Arlan loved him and cared for him, and that's wrapped up in this idea that Ser Arlan wanted him to be a knight. Again, it's possible he did, we just don't know. But with Dunk becoming Ser Arlan and thinking it about Egg, he's placing it into Ser Arlan's mouth. The fish was still a little raw on the inside when they ate it, and the boy had not removed all the bones, but it still tasted a world better than hard salt beef. Egg soon fell asleep beside the dying fire. Dunk lay on his back nearby, his big hands behind his head, gazing up at the night sky. He could hear distant music from the tourney grounds half a mile away. The stars were everywhere, thousands and thousands of them. One fell as he was watching, bright green streak that flashed across the black and then was gone. A falling star brings luck to him who sees it, Dunk thought. But the rest of them are all in their pavilions by now, staring up at silk instead of sky. So the luck is mine alone. And so here Dunk comments on the fish, a little raw but better than hard salt beef. And this is a little metaphor for his situation. Egg isn't perfect company, but it's better than being alone. And then Dunk looks up at the sky and sees a shooting star, which he believes is lucky for him. On top of this, he believes that he is the only one that sees it because everyone else should be in their pavilion. Of course, music was still playing over at Ashford, so lots of people would still be outside. Dunk is being delusional here, but that's not really what's important. It's what Dunk believes. And this is a very big moment for Dunk. The shooting star over the tree pavilion is what Dunk chooses as his sigil. And yes, Dunk does choose his sigil rather quickly with the help of Egg, but it does represent who he is, and it is a major theme for the entire story. So, what is the shooting star in the tree? Well, we've essentially been told what it is. The tree pavilion is a symbol of poverty and hardship, and the shooting star is luck, rewarding Dunk for his hardship and his poverty. Somehow, for some reason, Dunk believes that his hardship has given him an edge in life. Of course, this is in fact wrong. Poverty and hardship doesn't help one become a knight at all. It's a hindrance. There is nothing good or romantic about being poor. Trees aren't pavilions. They leak. It's the wealthy nobles who have the time and resources to train, not the small folk, just as being poor in the real world doesn't help one in life. It hinders you. Quite obviously. And shooting stars don't bring luck. Even if they did, Dunk is probably not the only person to see the shooting star as music was still playing over at Ashford Meadow. Dunk receives no benefit from any of this. However, he believes he does. He has hope and drive. It's absolutely delusional, and Dunk is beyond reckless, and yet, this hope and drive define who he is. Dunk, and the entire story of the Hedge Knight, is thematically quixotic. That is, being extremely idealistic and hopeful, despite being unrealistic and impractical. Named after Cervantes' Don Quixote, a story about another man who pretends to be a knight, setting aside reality and hoping for a better world. By the way, it's certainly not a coincidence that Egg, the skeptic, later dons a straw hat and rides a donkey in The Sworn Sword, to make him look like Sancho Panza, beside the Don Quixote-like Dunk. And this is a good place to stop. We'll continue on in part 6.